This throwback episode of the Keeper's Heart interview with Kate Douglas on Old Fashioned Football on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Hall of Fame Bets, the sports betting research platform for parlays, player props, and game lines. Download the Hall of Fame Bets app or visit hofbets.com. Use code SGPN to get 50% off your first month and start making smarter bets today. We're also brought to you by Cut. Cut is a peer-to-peer social betting platform that's U.S.-based and available in 40 states. Head to cut.com, that's KUTT.com, and use promo code SGPN for a 10% deposit bonus. And we're also brought to you by the SGPN merch store. 15% off everything when you use promo code PLAYOFFS, and stay tuned to hear about our merch contest.
Hey, what's up? This is Sam Acho, and you're listening to Old Fashioned Football.
Old-fashioned football.
You make this deal right now, you can't take any mother.
All right, deal.
Old-fashioned football.
What's up, everybody? This is a throwback episode because this one was before we had our YouTube page. We did this one before we did the YouTube page. Justin Miranda here. You're going to hear our intro, but of course you can find me on the X at JMarkFootball. You can find Miranda at the Mermark, and you can find us at Old Fashioned FB. And we just thought we'd throw it back and do this Keeper's Heart one because we had so much fun with it with Kate Douglas. We're going to bring her on. And yeah, we hope you enjoy it. Here is the show. All right. We let everybody know that we are going to have a special guest on this week.
Yes, our guest has 2 degrees from Colorado State University, one in food and safety and the other in fermentation, science, and technology. She was the head distiller at Old Elk Distillery in Fort Collins before joining O'Shaughnessy Distilling to help make Keeper's Heart. We're excited to talk whiskey and some football, of course, with Kate Douglas. Kate, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you guys today?
Good.
We're good.
It's a nice rainy day and we need the rain, so I can't complain. We talked a little before this podcast, and you're a lifelong Dolphins fan. I'm just curious, did you grow up in Florida, or how did you become a Dolphins fan?
You know, people always ask me if I grew up in Florida or if I have some sort of connection to Florida. I'm from New Mexico. We don't have a team. We don't have any teams.
Yeah.
Kind of like us in Iowa. We just have to pick from around us.
Exactly. And so it was actually some of my cousins started following the Dolphins, and we just kind of latched on. And it's funny because now, you know, my brother and I are super into it, and the cousins don't really watch football at all anymore.
Nice.
And so it was a funny little roundabout way. But yeah, I've been watching them, you know, my whole life pretty much. So
nice.
we're finally doing okay.
Yeah, right. As Bears fans, we know that feeling of
yes.
the long periods of doing bad and finally doing okay. And
It's been rough for us.
It has been rough for us. We're hopeful, though. We're hopeful.
Yeah.
Well, as a Dolphins fan and a fantasy football player, I have heard about your all-women's fantasy league, which really intrigues me.
We're called the V League.
Nice.
We have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It sounds like it would be fun. So we have a couple of football questions for you before we get into all things whiskey and Keeper's Heart. I'm going to kind of start with the Dolphins then, since we're already talking about them. It kind of seems like their success has been relying on the health of Tua this last year at quarterback.
Yeah.
And he seemed to take a step forward in play when healthy, though. I had him as one of my quarterbacks in one of my leagues. So when he was healthy, he did really well for me. But what are your thoughts on Tua in general, and if he's going to be able to stay healthy this year?
Well, I wasn't sold on him when we got him. And then with the concussions last season, like when he got hit in the Bills game, he shouldn't have gone back in. And then that next week when he had the really bad concussion and like his hand seized up and everything, I was like, that's a career ender right there. Like, I don't even think he should come back.
Yeah.
So it's been hard. There was so much support behind him. But I just worry for his own safety, his own health. I honestly don't know if he's going to make it through this season.
Yeah, I worry for him too, because it's like if he takes another hit and he has another, that's so bad for him as an individual. Like, football aside, like I can't imagine risking that. And I don't know.
Right.
And
I know he's like wearing a different helmet now to try and prevent concussions and everything, but when you have so many back to back, like that's scary. It's really,
for sure.
Scary.
He reportedly considered retirement this offseason, and I can't say that I blame him. I mean, I know the guys out on the field, they love the game, they're passionate about it, but when you hear all the stories of these guys that played 20 years ago and they can't remember their way home and everything, it's a very scary thing, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great game to watch, but it is physically brutal.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
And you got to think about, your long-term health, and ultimately it is just a game. It is just a career. If you know what you're doing outside of it, then sometimes you got to weigh those options.
Yeah. So as a lifelong fan, who's your favorite past Dolphins player and your favorite current Dolphins player?
I mean, can anyone not say Dan Marino? I mean, he was so good.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a classic. I think I have like 2 or 3 of his jerseys upstairs.
Nice.
But then more recently, I was sad to see Jarvis Landry leave. But excited about the team that we have now. Love watching Waddle play.
Yeah.
He's really fun.
He is.
And then Tyreek Hill, I wasn't a huge fan when he came into the league, but
really?
Yeah, there were just a few things, but he's been an incredible player. And he's a cheetah. He's so fast. So it's been fun seeing him, in our turquoise and orange.
Miranda is a big Tyreek Hill fan.
I am.
You
like
draft
just
him a lot.
fantasy. I'm a huge fan of him because of fantasy football.
Yeah.
Let's just say that.
Well, I mean, he racks up the points.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So, as a Bears fan, I always have these very high expectations. They never seem to meet them. What are your expectations for the Dolphins this year, and kind of how do you think they'll do in this division? Because it is kind of a tougher division.
It is. I mean, we've got the Bills, which, I mean, those games were so good last year. I'm actually going to one of the Bills games this year. The Bills Dolphins in Miami in January with my family. I think it'll be us and the Bills at the top again. Once Brady left the Patriots, they've kind of gotten to the wayside. A little nervous about the Jets. Honestly, just because last year they had like a surprise stretch, and then I don't know about with Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets. That's gonna end. But I mean, I think if Tua can stay healthy, or if we have a solid quarterback, we've got great, receivers and whatnot. So I think it'll be between us and the Bills.
Yeah. As a Bears fan, I'm glad Rodgers is not in our division anymore. But
so good luck with that.
Yeah, but he is getting to that point
Marys
where
at the end are so stressful.
Yeah, he is getting to that point though. I don't feel like he's at that much of a threat. It just seems like he saves his best games for against the Bears. It seemed like that every year. So
Bears or against the Cowboys, he would always come back on the Cowboys and just destroy them.
Yeah. So I'm glad. A good riddance to him. That's what I say.
So I already mentioned you are in an all women's fantasy league. What kind of fantasy football leagues do you participate in? Like redraft, dynasty?
So it's a
Keeper?
redraft.
Redraft. Okay.
Redraft with a standard snake draft. I haven't done auctions. I've been hearing you guys talk a lot about the auctions and the dollar values, and that part I don't have experience in.
No, that is okay. We started with just redrafts when we were first starting, and then we got into auction, and it gets addicting trying all the different, like being a part of all these different leagues. And
no, I'm tempted to just I'm tempted to try and get one started with the distilling team, but I'm tempted to do an auction league this year just to kind of see what it's like, try it out. And you definitely, it seems like you can get super nitpicky, and
it's a lot of
a whole other level in.
Yes, sure. It's a lot of strategizing, and like you just don't know. Like some people will bid really high on someone, and they'll blow their whole budget, and then it's harder to get.
So is there like a bidding war, or is it just highest bid goes? Okay.
So there's a bidding war. Basically, in your draft, everybody, if you're starting from scratch, you have a $200 budget. That's kind of the standard. And you nominate a player, and then it's just like an auction. Everybody can start bidding, and depending on what platform you use, there's a countdown. And it seems like as it's counting down, you're at going once, going twice, and right at going twice. Somebody bids, you think you have your player. Somebody jumps in there, and then it resets to 10 seconds, and you got to think like, do I want to go more on this guy? It does get it gets very intense during drafts. We actually can't sit in the same rooms anymore.
We can't. We have to draft in opposite rooms of the house.
At least you learned.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, it is fun though.
Yes.
So what are your draft strategies? Do you have any particular draft strategy you follow? Do you always go running back first, or do you just does it depend?
It really depends on draft order. I mean, because sometimes you get stuck with almost, 2 rotations of not getting a pick. So it really just depends, who's available.
Yeah.
But typically wide receiver or running back first.
Sure.
Do you have a number 1 target this year?
She's like, I don't want to tell in case somebody.
It's tough. In case one of the girls is listening.
Right.
No, I mean, it really depends. Being in Minnesota, Justin Jefferson is definitely a high one. Jason Waddle, of course. Tyreek Hill. So yeah, we'll find out on draft day.
Yes.
For sure. Yeah. Before we keep talking about everything, we got to remind you that we are brought to you by DraftKings. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL playoffs, is bringing you an offer that'll help make the playoffs electrifying. New customers can bet just $5 on any game. That's right, any game, and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. If it were me, I'm taking the Niners to take the Packers down. But it's a little fun to think about the Bucks maybe getting into that NFC North championship game. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code SGP. New customers get just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets, or only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code SGP. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, make sure you call 778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/football for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. All right, well, let's switch to whiskey and Keeper's Heart, which is relatively new on the whiskey scene, but it seems to be growing quickly. So we already gave a little bit of history, but we want to get some more information kind of from your perspective.
Yes.
So we have a pretty fun history, and it's very family based. So, our founders Michael and Patrick O'Shaughnessy, they're cousins. Patrick lives here in St. Paul, and Michael lives in Wichita, and they were at a family reunion one year, sitting around with a bunch of O'Shaughnessys because they're spread out across the country, and talking about, how great would it be to have a whiskey brand of our own at a distillery in some place that the family could all come and hang out and all this stuff. And then the next morning, some of them were like, that's a terrible idea. But then Patrick, Michael, and Michael's dad, Jay, were like, nah, is it that bad of an idea? That could actually work. And so then, you get Patrick set on something and he's just going to run with it. So he started doing a bunch of research along with Michael, and then they started reaching out to Irish distillers because they really wanted to highlight their Irish heritage. They could follow their family back from when they came over from Ireland and landed and then worked their way over to Minnesota with the logging industry, and one of the great grandfathers was a bootmaker, and I mean they've got the whole story down set. Cool. And so they really wanted to highlight that Irish side. And the first couple of people they talked to, they're like, you're never gonna get an Irish distiller to move to Minnesota of all places. And I think Patrick reached out to Brian on LinkedIn, just a message like, hey, we're looking to start this brand, we're wondering if you just want to chat. And Brian, as master distiller of Irish distillers at Middleton, making Jameson, Redbreast, the spot whiskeys, Powers, so much of the Irish whiskey that we get here. He's like, okay, we can have a conversation, but I'm not going anywhere. Because I mean, why would he? He had a dream job that, over the last 100 years, he was the third master distiller of the company. And it's really something that you either retire in or die in. And but he said, yes, we can have a conversation. And so Patrick and Michael and Jerry were like, all right, let's get on a plane. They reached back out to Brian, said, we'll be there in 3 days. And, we'd love to have you and your wife, Una, come to dinner and talk. And Brian was kind of, excited about it because most people didn't involve Una in the business side of things. And Una is an incredible woman. And they went and had dinner, didn't really talk about whiskey. At the end, the O'Shaughnessy's were like, Brian, good luck at Middleton. We'll just take Una. And, Brian and Una got in the car, and Una's like, if we didn't have 3 kids, I'd say we should get on the plane with them. And they really didn't talk about whiskey. It was more just about life and family. And I think having that kind of connection really made Brian rethink whether or not he wanted to leave Middleton. And ultimately, they decided to make the move. And of course, they tried to come over in 2020, and the world was shut down.
Yes.
And then they had issues with visas and all of that. So we broke ground on the distillery in 2020. And then Brian got here August of 21. So there was a lot of waiting, and, we had to develop a whiskey in that time period. And so there was a lot of shipping samples back and forth. And I think it took them I don't know, the numbers always change, but for some reason, I always want to say it was 143 different renditions of blending Irish and American whiskeys together before they decided on Keeper's Heart, the current blend of Irish and rye whiskey.
Nice. That's really interesting.
No, that is that's a fascinating story. We didn't know any of that.
I did not.
No.
I was curious how Brian's involvement came about. I definitely was, because I mean he's a guy that kind of, when you think Irish whiskey, people that know Irish whiskey really well, they think Brian Nation. So very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question, for your path. I know we already mentioned your degrees at Colorado State. But when did you first decide that you wanted to get into distilling?
Well, I didn't realize that like whiskey was a path that you could go down with a fermentation degree for a long time. Being at CSU, Fort Collins is such a beer-centric town. And I was in the first graduating class of the fermentation program, and we were, brewing on campus a couple times a semester and then off campus a couple times. So, at Odell, working with New Belgium, working with these smaller breweries, that's the direction that I thought I was going to go. I always enjoyed drinking whiskey, but didn't really think of it as like a valid option to go into. Until, funny enough, I walked into Target, which is where I used to work my senior year. And I ran into my old boss, and we were talking, and she's like, well, what do you want to do? What's your game plan? And I told her I was just kind of looking for an internship to try and figure out what I wanted to do long term. She's like, oh my gosh, my boyfriend is a distiller and he could really use an intern. Like, would you mind if I gave him your phone number? I was like, Allie, I literally told you that I'm looking for an internship. Like, if your boyfriend needs an intern, like, I'm your gal. And at the time he was at Old Elk Distillery, and funny enough, I now work with him again here at Keeper's Heart. So that was just a fun little story. But yeah, I started making whiskey the Monday after graduation. And then when Chris ultimately moved back out here, or moved to Minnesota to be with his now wife, I took over as head distiller there and worked with Greg Metz, the master distiller there and formerly of MGP, and did that for a while. And then, that kind of fizzled out and ended, and was looking, and I looked at, places in Kentucky. I was looking, on the East Coast, kind of all over. And then Chris, who had been hounding Brian when he first announced that he was going to O'Shaughnessy to be like, hey, I really want to work here. Like, I've been waiting for a whiskey distillery to open up here. Like, I went back to beer after making whiskey, and I really want to get back into whiskey. Here are some samples of stuff that I made. So once he got hired, he was, bringing in the equipment and constantly sending me pictures. Oh, look at this pot still we just got. Look at this other pot still. Look at this column still. Look at this. And I was like, oh my gosh, fine. Okay, let's have a conversation. Because I gave him so much crap for moving to Minnesota. And now here I am. But yeah, so he's been a nice little guiding light in my career.
Nice.
But yeah, it was a good choice. I mean, once I saw the facility, it definitely solidified my decision. Because the brew house is beautiful. We've got 3 beautiful pot stills from Forsyth, a great column set up from Vendome. So you don't normally get, column distillation and pot still distillation in the same facility.
Yeah.
So it's super unique. And as a distiller, for a place to learn and to be working with Brian Nation. And then, when David Perkins came on, like, it was just getting to work with the greats is pretty incredible.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing experience.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, you know what? We will get back to Kate Douglas and talking more about Keeper's Heart in just a second. But before we do, we got to tell you, we're brought to you by Cut. Cut is a peer-to-peer social betting platform that's U.S. based and available in 40 states. And it's the new and better way to bet. Grab your friends. They keep talking smack that their team's going to beat yours. Now they can put their money where their mouth is. Plus, Cut handles the payment side of things. So maybe it's just somebody online talking a lot of smack. You don't really know them. Don't worry, you don't got to chase them down or worry about not getting paid. Social features include group chats, betting leaderboards, head-to-head history, user profiles, fan groups, and more. Plus, you get cash back every single time you bet against your friends or other users. Cut is the peer-to-peer social betting platform that's U.S.-based and legal in 40 states. Head to cut.com, that's KUTT.com, and use promo code SGPN for a 10% deposit bonus. We're also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks, we've been talking about it. We love PrizePicks here. And you can play along some of your favorite players. It's easy to get your entry in. It's just getting the fantasy projections higher or lower. Plus, they even offer a reboot policy so that if your player gets injured in the first half and does not come in that second half, that is rebooted, doesn't count against you. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Plus, it's super simple. It takes 60 seconds to set a lineup, and you could win 25 times your money. Plus, they offer weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value, and they offer Apple Pay now. It is the best thing since sliced bread, which, I don't know if you know this, was invented in Iowa. Now, they're releasing the lines as these games are getting a little bit closer, so we don't have all of them yet. But one of them that I love is taking higher on any fantasy projection on Mike Evans. I think he's going to have a big game, whether the Bucs win or lose. Just go to prizepicks.com/SGPN and use code SGPN for first deposit match up to $100. That's $100 free on prizepicks.com/SGPN, code SGPN. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. So you got your 2 degrees. Did you do them both at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, funny enough, I only needed like 1 capstone to get my food safety degree, since I had already taken so many of the classes for fermentation.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, why not? Let's go for
it. Throw it on there.
Yeah,
what
I definitely
use
the fermentation degree more than the food safety degree.
Yeah, sure.
What is your day-to-day like there at the distillery?
Well, right now, so currently we're on a shift schedule, and so it's 12-hour shifts. It's either 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And that rotates a lot. So it's a lot of time away from the distillery, because the max days you'll work in a week is 4, but then you have like 6 days off. And then you work 2 days and then have, a couple more days off. So it rotates a lot. And we typically rotate between the brew house and the still house. So there are always 2 distillers on shift, 1 brewing, 1 distilling. So it depends on what side you're on. On the brew side, you're milling, fermenting, like brewing, fermenting, cleaning a lot on that side. If you're distilling, typically that's, running the pot side and the columns at the same time, and then barreling product as you go, rehydrating barrels if we need to, checking your gravities, making sure that your distill is coming off nice and tasty. It's a lot of putting out, little fires, a lot of troubleshooting things. And then on top of that, being one of the managers, it's, trying to manage the team while you're on shift. Tasting our distillate from throughout the previous week to make sure that everything is tasting as it should. But after the 4th of July, I will switch to doing more day shift managing side of things. So a lot more quality focused, liquid focused, working on single barrels and barrel finishes and whatnot. So.
Oh, very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, we talked to a distiller before, and they said they didn't realize how much janitorial work would be involved with being a distiller. Lots of cleaning in.
It's not nearly as much as brewing.
Really?
Oh yeah, because brewing, you're not once you finish brewing a beer, you're gonna ferment it, but then it's just going into a can, a bottle, a keg. So if something goes wrong, if you get some sort of like bacterial infection or, some wild yeast goes in there, it's going to change the flavor and you're screwed.
Okay.
Distilling, if you have a little bit of funk in there, it's going to give you really nice esters on the back end after distillation. So that's okay.
So funk is good.
Funk is good. So like brewing, you're cleaning, with the caustic after every single fermentation.
Yes.
Distilling, we clean our fermenters like once a month or so.
Okay, nice.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's a weird switch when you switch from the brewing industry to distilling, because it's like, wait, you can just set that hose down right there, and you don't have to like sanitize it right after, or we're not going to totally do a CIP and an SIP. You don't have to purge anything. Like, what?
So we talked a little bit about Brian Nation. For, I guess, the past several years, my parents have been just Irish nuts, I guess. They love
crazy about everything Ireland
and
anything
Irish
Irish.
And so they're actually the ones that introduced us to Keeper's Heart because they knew Brian Nation, and they're like, pretty much every Irish whiskey, they're like, oh, we got to try this. But what's it been like working with Brian Nation and David Perkins?
Oh, it's been great. Brian's traveling a lot with getting the brand off the ground and whatnot. But David Perkins isn't there all that often, but when he is, it's sitting down and it's tasting through everything, and getting to blend with both of them. It was the three of us working on the Irish bourbon blend, which was just a super incredible experience, because they're both so knowledgeable. Brian has this incredible wealth of knowledge in, everything from brewing, fermentation, distillation, blending, and all of that on the Irish side, which I was super, blind to for the most part. I had some Irish whiskey, but I was definitely more like bourbon and rye focused at Old Elk. And David's like this quirky, almost hippie-esque guy. And they both just have this incredible knowledge base, and it's funny sitting down and hearing them kind of banter back and forth. But it's really great. It's kind of a dream come true getting to work with such incredible distillers and blenders.
Nice. Yeah. And what's your favorite part of distilling at Keeper's Heart? Is it just getting to work with people like that, or the uniqueness, I guess, between having, like you said, the copper stills and the column distill? What's kind of your favorite thing?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of, having the variety and experience of, learning triple pot distillation and how different that distillate tastes from the column distillations. And then everything we're doing on the pot side is kind of like the world's first almost. Like we're just finishing up our campaign of doing a triple pot distilled rye whiskey.
Nice.
And the flavors coming off of that has been absolutely incredible.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, we're getting ready to start a campaign of triple pot distilled bourbon, which has never really been done before. The rye has never really been done before. We wanted to do mostly it hasn't been done before because the pot stills aren't very conducive to doing grain on distillation. So we actually had to modify our Forsyth wash still because of the heating element. Without modifying it, the grain would just sink to the bottom and scorch. And scorched grain gives a terrible flavor that you don't want. Which is why in Ireland and in the classic Irish style, you lauter everything. So you separate your grain from your liquid. While the American side, doing column distillation, you do everything grain on. So just getting to be a part of something that is going to be so historic is really cool. And, blending Irish and American whiskeys on a finished whiskey side of things is cool, because I think Jameson did it a little bit before. I think it was World War II. They had an Irish and American blend. And then after that, it had never really been done. But the Irish whiskey blends incredibly well with American. So it's fun being at such a unique company in so many different facets.
For sure. One last interruption. We're also brought to you by Hall of Fame Bets. Win bigger by betting smarter this NFL season with Hall of Fame Bets, the sports betting analytics platform for parlays, props, and game lines. Research every NFL, NBA, and soccer bet with historical stats and data. Enter any parlay idea into Hall of Fame Bets' revolutionary parlay optimizer tool to get hit rates broken down by leg, as well as an expected probability for the entire parlay. Sort all players by hit rate for any bet to learn which players are hot and which picks have value. Stop betting in the dark and join over 30,000 users researching with Hall of Fame Bets to craft more intelligent, data-driven parlays. Download the Hall of Fame Bets app or visit HOFBets.com and use code SGPN to get 50% off your first month today. Start researching, start winning with Hall of Fame Bets. We're also brought to you by the SGPN merch store. 15% off everything in the store now until the end of the month with promo code PLAYOFFS. We're competing against other shows, so please head on over to the store and order some old-fashioned football merch. Plus, if you do, send us a screenshot of your receipt because we're putting you in a drawing. The winner will get a $50 gift card to the SGPN store or a $50 gift card to a Spirits or a bottle of booze that's worth $50. And if we win the competition against the other shows, we are doubling that, so it will be a $100 value. All you got to do is just buy some merch, and every item you buy gets you another entry. So if you buy 2 items, that's 2 entries. 3 items, that's 3 entries. What are you waiting for? Go over there, sg.pn/store, and make sure you get your old-fashioned football gear.
I think I might. I guess I don't know. What has been your favorite product you've worked on in your entire distilling career?
In my entire career. That's a toughie. I mean, the Irish bourbon is definitely up there because of getting to literally sit in a lab with Brian and David and taste, a bunch of different bourbons to see what kind of bourbon mash bill we wanted to use. Mm-hmm. And then go through, with our little beakers and graduated cylinders and try different blends. And it was so cool to be sitting with them while working on that and kind of tinkering through the recipe. So I'd say that, and then blending and bringing to market the wheated bourbon at Old Elk.
Yeah.
Because that's one of my favorite recipes that we did there. And while I was head distiller there, I was doing most of the blending. Once we switched to the new bottle, I was blending everything up until I left. And that's just so cool. Blending is super cool.
It sure sounds like it.
Yeah.
We haven't been able yet, we haven't had an opportunity yet to get up to the Keeper's Heart Distillery or the O'Shaughnessy Distillery yet. But we really need to. We really we have
that long of a drive.
No, and I do have family just over the border in Minnesota too, so we see them once in a while, and yeah, that's not that far. I think it's a 4-hour drive from us, so we don't have an excuse to make time to get up there. But
I mean, I did that drive. I was down in Iowa City, or no, Sioux City, not that long ago, doing a dinner, and then I'll be in Waterloo in August for the Irish Festival. So if I can make the drive, you guys can make the drive. Come on up.
Looking through the website, it just looks like an amazing place. And I saw that there was a lot of different experiences that the distillery offers to the public, and we don't see that a lot around here. Could you tell us about some of those different experiences that even our listeners, if they're in the area, can stop by and
so we have a couple. Our most standard and our most widely available is going to be the standard tour and tasting. And so that you get to go with some of our whiskey educators and talk about brewing, fermentation, distillation, and then at the end you do a tasting, and that includes tasting the Irish pot still, the Irish grain, and the American rye that goes into Keeper's Heart. You taste them individually, and then you taste the finished product. And so that really just helps people kind of understand what each product gives to keepers. I love it because then you can sit down with someone and be like, oh, well, this whiskey tastes like honeysuckle, and someone else is like, well, this one tastes like Welch's white grape juice, and like it just people will taste so many different things, and then because each individual has a unique palate, and you know your sensory is so close to like your memory, so you'll think of things that you know someone else hasn't experienced, or you'll have different verbiage for what you're tasting, and it's just really cool to sit down and taste each thing, and then try keepers as a whole and really be able to pick up what flavor is coming from what whiskey. And then you can take that one step further and do the blending class, which I believe is offered every other Saturday. And that, you know, you go on a tour and then you sit down, you do the tasting, but then you get to actually make your own blend. So you'll talk about, you know, blending theory and, you know, why you take, you know, why we use the pot still and the grain whiskey and then the rye. And then you get to blend your own. So if you like something that is maybe more pot still heavy, you can make that. If you like something that's more rye heavy, you can make it. If you only want to use 2 of the whiskeys, go for it. And so you get 3 renditions, and then your last one can get made into a cocktail. So it's kind of fun just to let people see, you know, kind of some of that art of blending. Because there are sometimes when people's like, this is terrible. I am not doing that one again. You know, and you'll just kind of, it's just fun to see what people come up with. And it also gives a nod to the blenders of the world that, you know, it is an art form.
Yeah.
So that's fun. And then we also do a cocktail class with some of our bar staff. So just a way to kind of educate people on how to use Keeper's Heart. And I think they'll make a Manhattan and kind of talk about the history of that specific cocktail, which is fun. So that's one thing that I love about whiskey. Is always, you know, taking something one step further. You basically make beer, take it one step further into a distillate, which, you know, can then be made into vodka or gin or whiskey if you macerate it. And then you mature that into an aged product, and then you can drink that neat, or you can put it in a cocktail, or you can bake with it, or you can cook with it. And it's just something that's ever evolving, which I absolutely love.
No, for sure. And a lot of unique offerings too. I mean, I can't think of anything a distillery I've been to where you get to do like the blending and everything. That sounds awesome.
It does.
So sign me up.
we need when we need to go on Saturday that they're doing that.
Right. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. And then you can finish with, you know, a cocktail or 2. And we just released a new menu from the kitchen, and there's some really good food too.
Awesome. So, I mean, I feel like we've named a bunch of things, but kind of just in a nutshell, what do you think sets Keeper's Heart apart from other whiskeys?
I mean, I think it's, you know, taking a legendary distiller and, you know, kind of letting him really play and put something new into the market, and, you know, blending Irish and American whiskeys together, because it's such a great flavor combination. And then we really listen to our consumers. You know, we released the Irish American, which is the Irish and rye blend. And then we released the Irish bourbon blend. And we were doing single barrel finishes of the Irish American, and, you know, that we typically release at 110 proof. And everyone's like, I love these finishes, but can I also just get that 110? We're like, oh, sorry. Like, no, that's not available. Well, now it's available.
Nice.
And then, you know, people were saying, oh, I love this Irish bourbon. You know, it's at a higher proof than the Irish American, but I'd really love to see what it was like at cask. So now we're bottling the Irish bourbon at cask proof right now. So, you know, we are listening to our consumers constantly, which I think is fun, and not everyone does, or at least not at the speed, the rate that we're doing. So,
right.
I think that definitely sets us apart.
Yeah. So this is the part of the podcast that I always call like the heavy editing part. Is we're gonna see if you could walk us through some tastings, because we have the Irish American and the Irish bourbon, but with tastings, there's always some pausing and everything. So
Absolutely.
We'll cut the pauses out so listeners aren't just having silence.
Okay. Cool. Well, we'll start with you have both of them in the background, right?
Yes. Yep. We do.
Okay, so we'll start with the Irish American because it is at a lower proof. So this is going to be a blend of 4-year Irish pot still, 4-year Irish grain, and 4-year American rye.
Okay.
Because all of this is 4 years and because it has Irish, we clearly did not distill this whiskey.
Yeah, right.
It is a blend of other people's product. But that's one thing that Brian is very adamant on. He will not release something that we did not make or we did not tweak in some way, shape, or form. So
Sure.
like we also have a 10-year Irish single malt that we then finished in Malaga wine casks.
Oh, nice.
So we wouldn't release it if we didn't finish it in something.
Yeah.
So with this one, we blended the 2 Irish and the 1 rye.
Okay.
And go ahead and take a whiff.
Yeah.
If you get too much alcohol burn, just open your mouth a little bit. And that kind of helps get more of the flavor instead of the alcohol.
It definitely smells like an Irish whiskey.
It does, yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
The Irish whiskey has a certain smell,
Yep.
and this smells like that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, you get that like rich earthiness from the pot still.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually the pot still that David Perkins said reminded him of the Welch's white grape juice.
Oh, really?
And Brian was like, "For fuck's sake, what is that? Like, I've never even heard of that." And so immediately, someone from our staff went to the store, bought some white grape juice, brought it in. Brian smelled it, and he's like, "That's terrible."
Yeah.
But I do understand what David was thinking with that pot still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely get that earthiness. I get a little bit of like a bright citrus, almost a lemon.
Fruity.
Citrus.
There was I was trying to identify the fruit. It is a citrusy. Yeah.
Mhm. So that's coming from the grain whiskey.
I'm gonna rely on you two because my allergies have been going insane.
Oh,
It is
no.
smell a lot
bad
right
over
now.
here.
Unfortunately, I don't
Yeah.
smell a lot right now because of that. But
Well, and the other thing with sensory is, it takes a lot of practice,
Yeah.
and being able to, put what you're tasting into an actual word.
Yes.
Yeah.
I always like to have Nancy Fraley made an incredible whiskey flavor wheel that I will often look at and be like, okay, it's floral, but it's not roses. It's not this geranium. Yep, that's the one. Or like it's, just go through. And so I always recommend, like, if you want to get really nerdy, get that flavor wheel. Just because it helps you kind of put words to what you're tasting.
That's my problem. We like do these I call these like blind tastings where we're not told what like what you should get out of it.
Should get, yeah.
Mhm.
It's like, well, I know what I'm tasting, but I don't know how to say it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
There's so much pressure.
Definitely get a whiskey wheel. It does wonders.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
We'll go ahead and take a sip and enjoy it.
Super smooth.
It is very smooth. Yeah.
Yeah, so this one has more, like, I would say that the pot still is like the base component, and we kind of built on top of that pot still flavor. So you get that really nice warming in your chest, but not the heat. Super smooth.
It's not. There's no like. We've tried so many things like, oh, well, this one, the heat is right at the tip of your tongue, or it's like towards the back, or it's right in your throat. There isn't It's not hot. It's
don't get a lot.
warming
Yeah,
down
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of that, that really smooth mouthfeel, that warming flavor is due to the style of distillation. So with that pot still, because of the shape of the actual still, it allows more oils to come through. And so you get a more velvety, creamy texture. Where with the bourbon, you'll kind of see a slight switch in mouthfeel because it's more bourbon heavy, which was made on a column still. So
Yeah.
little fun fact for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, creamy. It definitely has like a creamy.
Yeah. I was gonna say kind of a fuller
texture,
body.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you get that earthiness, that like stewed fruit, that is so quintessential of pot still. And then I get the rye spice on the end.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a good way to describe it. It's definitely the finish of spice.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always pick up. I feel like the more whiskeys that I'm trying to like analyze, I get the weird taste, and everybody's like, "What?" But I get like warm apricot, just a little warm apricot flavor for some reason. I don't know why.
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's spot on. That is spot on, my friend.
I'm getting better at it. Maybe.
You are.
Right?
Maybe the
You
people
didn't
giving me
even
weird
need the
looks,
whiskey
like-
wheel for that.
Right.
Yeah, no, apricot is definitely something that I pick up.
Mm-hmm. Now that I said it, I bet you get it.
Yeah, there was a fruit in there. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, kind of apricot.
Yeah, y'all
I
will have
think-
to come up to the distillery and do the tasting because you'll taste the grain whiskey, which is very sweet and citrusy and a little bit of honey, but it's a very thin whiskey. Like it finishes very crisp, and then you've got the pot still, which is very thick and creamy and earthy and a little bit of spice, and then you've got the rye, which is just super spicy, and then like it'll totally change Keeper's heart for you.
Yeah, I bet.
You'll have to come up because it's so cool.
Yeah. Oh, this is very good.
It is very good.
Like very smooth, but it's got the warming, the nice spice finish, and it's just it's got a little sweetness, just not overly sweet, but it's just got that little underlying.
Subtle.
Yeah,
It's a little subtle.
yeah,
Yeah. Makes a great old fashioned. It blends really well in cocktails. That's another thing that Brian was very intentional on. Like he wanted it to be, that you can sip it or have it really stand up in a cocktail, because so much Irish whiskey gets lost in a cocktail that you really just don't even use it for that.
agreed.
But the rye backbone in Keepers really helps it kind of stand out. And what I didn't know for the longest time was that a lot of bartenders will actually mix whiskeys when they're making an old fashioned in order to kind of get the flavor profile that they want. I learned this from Pip, our beverage director. And with Keepers, you don't have to do that because you already have such a complex base spirit that you just, add a little bit of sugar, a little bit of orange zest, and some bitters, and you're all set.
Yeah.
That is very good.
We were recently at a restaurant that they listed 2 different whiskeys,
And it was
in
the
an
first old fashioned I had that had 2 whiskeys.
that you knew of.
That I knew of. That I knew of. But normally, when you're ordering, it tells you what's in everything.
What's in it,
and
yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that so many bartenders would mix whiskeys. But I mean, it makes sense if you're just looking for a more complex flavor that you would need to blend a couple together. And we already did the blending for you. So
Exactly. Alrighty.
All right. So this next one is the Irish bourbon. It is at 92 proof compared to the 86 of the Irish American. So with this product, we really bourbon drinkers love their bourbon, and they don't always like to stray from bourbon. So we wanted a product that was very much bourbon forward, but still had that pot still flavor to it. And turns out if you just blend pot still and bourbon, it kind of lacks something. And so we added some of that grain whiskey in there as well. And it just helped everything pop. It was just that perfect little, blender, like, something that really pulls everything together and highlights the best of each product. So it'll be a very different flavor profile and mouthfeel compared to the Irish American.
It smells sweet.
Yeah.
Caramely.
A nice bourbon smell to it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, corn is a super sweet grain, and then you're going to get more caramel and more vanilla because, bourbon and American whiskey in general is aged in a new barrel, whereas Irish whiskey is always aged in used barrels. And so because this one has a higher percentage of bourbon, you're going to get a lot more of that caramel, a lot more of that oakiness coming through, that sweetness from the corn. So it's very different.
Yeah.
You still get a little bit of spice from the rye that's in the bourbon mash bill, but definitely that sweetness comes through.
Since I'm not smelling really well, I went right to the tasting.
You're just like, I'm just tasting.
Yep.
But, I always say when you're drinking whiskey, you're not wrong in how you drink it and what you get. Like, you're all set when you're drinking whiskey. What are you getting on the flavor or on the nose?
It's really got a nice oakiness at first, but it's very smooth. That one I feel like is more forward warming. And then when it goes down, there's not that much warmth. It's just a nice smooth finish.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's because more of it is made on the column still. So the heat is kind of in the front of your mouth compared to as it goes down your throat.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much. There's heat.
Yeah. And with this one, for me personally, I get, more of that bourbon flavor. Right off the bat, a little bit of the pot still on the finish, and then like as I exhale, I get that citrus note from the grain whiskey, which I always think it's funny how different they taste. Where those whiskeys pop in your mouth.
For sure.
Well, this is definitely has the smoothness of the from the pot still, and
and you can tell that it's a little thinner than the Irish American.
I still feel like it's really full
body.
It's creamy to me still, like compared to it still is to me.
And like I said, you're not wrong. You're drinking whiskey, you're not wrong.
Right. So is the plan, are you guys going to eventually make your own? Obviously, you can't make your own Irish whiskey in its true form because we're not in Ireland. But is the plan to make like your own bourbon and rye and all that?
So probably not to go into the blends.
Okay.
Right now, a lot of our column distilled product is actually being contract distilled, so we are selling it as we make it. We're keeping all of the pot still product for ourselves, and that'll be released on its own after 3 to 4 years, depending on how it's tasting. Kind of the first 2 years of maturation, you get more of the oak infusion. And then after that period, those molecules start to change and transform and get more complex through some, a little bit of magic and a little bit of science. And so we'll probably wait, between at least 3 to 4 years.
Okay. That one was very good as well. Did you have what's your favorite? I feel like they're both good, but I was just curious.
They're both very good. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I really like that. I think I like that.
American.
Yeah, I do.
Because more of the rye. I know you're kind of becoming more of a rye girl.
I am. I never knew I liked rye so much.
Yeah.
Well, because when I got into whiskey, it was bourbon. I was just drinking bourbon, and then I started trying other whiskeys. I don't know. I feel like I did it backwards instead of trying whiskeys and then going into bourbon. But I realized I really like rye. I like the all the flavor and spice. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of spice in rye.
Mhm.
I think rye can sometimes go into like a little floral, like a dark floral almost. But yeah, that spice in rye, those nice baking spices, those allspice, Cuban berry, really shine in the rye.
See, I like the Irish bourbon, but I am more of a bourbon drinker. I'm not a bourbon snob. I will drink other whiskeys.
We're just all whiskeys.
We do, yeah, we're all whiskeys. But when you were talking about like people that like bourbon and sometimes they don't like to stray from that, I have some friends that are bourbon snobs or just some people I know, and they're like, "Oh, it's not bourbon. I don't want to try it." It's like,
that's
just try it.
Like, oh my gosh,
you're closing the door on so many good things.
Open your mind, friend. There's a whole big world out there.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Now, generally, I like the bourbons better. Not, I mean, there are a lot of good products in everything. I feel like in every style of whiskey. So for me, I think it's Irish bourbon just because it does have that nice bourbon flavor that I like. But they're both very, very good.
I take back my previous statement. I didn't start with bourbon. The only whiskey I would drink before I got into bourbon was Irish whiskey.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love Jameson and Tully's.
Tully's, yeah.
And then this all started, we watched a bourbon documentary and it was
one?
I think it's called Grain, isn't it?
No, it was
Neat.
Was it Neat?
It was
Neat. It might have been Neat.
It was on
Yeah.
Netflix.
And then I was like, oh my gosh, I need to give bourbon a try. And I just liked how like pure it was, like and natural. And so we started trying bourbons and I kept more of an open mind and now I love bourbons. And then it went down a rabbit hole of whiskey. And that's my go-tos are whiskey and bourbon now. And
there's so much out there. There's so much out there. And yeah, it's fun, documentaries like that. Documentaries like I watched one, what was it? It was like a money heist and it was talking about like Pappygate or something. But just like kind of opening everyone's mind to all these different whiskeys and different styles. I mean, you take bourbon itself as a category, well, then you have, high rye bourbon or high wheat bourbon or high malt bourbon. And that's going to change the flavor profile. And then, Irish pot still, Scottish single malts, double distilled, triple distilled. Like it's a whole wide world.
And then all the finishes, all the different finishes, finished in rum casks, finished in Cabernet casks.
We're getting ready to release the Irish American that we finished in a Madeira cask for 11 months.
Yes.
And it is to die for. What are you doing next week? You want to come up?
Yes.
All right.
We'll be there.
Yeah.
Okay. June 13th, I think, is the release date. So you come on up. I'll give you all a tour. We'll taste some whiskey.
There you go. Yeah, I saw they were releasing that, and I thought of you.
We need to get that.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I will say, watching that documentary is like one of the best decisions I made because as soon as we got done with it, she looked at me and she goes, "We need to get more whiskey." I was like, "Yes, I've been saying this."
Been saying it for years, honey.
Right?
Yeah. Well, it can be a very expensive endeavor.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I've got a buddy out in Colorado, and he actually has his collection insured, and I think it's insured for more than his house.
Wow.
And I'm just like, oh, bless you. And he would bring in like random bottles every once in a while. He brought in a bottle that was distilled and aged pre-prohibition, and I tried it, and it was terrible. It was god awful. Like, I'm so glad we've come so far.
Yeah. I just recently tried, I can't even remember the brands now. But it was some Dusties. One was from 72 and the other, I think, 73.
I can't.
One of them was great. The
Yeah.
other one was terrible, and I don't know if that's how it was made, or if maybe it had some oxidation or whatever. Maybe it changed
Yeah.
a little. I'm not sure.
I mean,
but
it could have oxidation. It could just be a funky batch, or maybe the barrels were, at the bottom of the rick house and just got musty. I mean, there's so many factors that can go into it. It's pretty fascinating.
yeah, for sure. Very good stuff.
It's very good.
Very good. Is there anything else you wanted to add about Keeper's Heart or anything in general for our listeners?
I mean, I would definitely say if you see a bottle, behind a bar or something, try it. And you want to buy it, definitely go for it. It's something unique compared to what's on the market right now. And we're always coming up with new stuff. So keep an eye out for the stuff that we're distilling in-house in a couple of years, and then come see us. It's a beautiful facility, and we'd love to have you all.
From photos.
Yeah. We definitely need to make it up there. Again, it's only 4 hours.
I know. So we can get away.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. This
Really
has been
appreciate
fun.
it.
I feel like I've learned so much too. And
yeah,
this is definitely just such a unique whiskey. And
it
I'm
is.
excited we got to try it and
absolutely
have you on with us.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me on and letting me talk about Keeper's Heart.
Yeah, and good luck to the Dolphins this year.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Hopefully Tua stays healthy. Just for his sake in general, not just for the Dolphins, but for his sake.
For his sake, yes.
Yeah. Hopefully he stays healthy and have fun at the game.
Oh,
It's exciting.
All right. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.